So many of you guys asked for this, like 3 whole people on my last video on Across the Spiderverse, where I examined the treatment of the various spider people and their dimensions and the animation of the film as a whole. But in this video, I'm going to take a few shots from a specific scene and do a real deep dive on the animation and all the little nuances there on that particular section. It was a really hard choice on which one to pick. In my previous video, I already touched on some of my favorite scenes, particularly the emotional ones with Gwen and her dad, so I didn't want to rehash those even though they are brilliant, and I had way more to say about them than what I did in that video, but I eventually picked this one where the Spot gets hardcore. I really like this scene. I kind of felt bad for the Spot at first. Nobody would take him seriously, they saw him as a clown, and I was like, you go, man, you do you, when he leveled up here.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
Let's start here where Miles is getting thrown to the floor by the Spot. We've got these nice action lines acting as smear frames from the speed of the throw, and really clear silhouette as his fingers are splayed here as he flies through the air, feet and head are defined, and again here where he's flat on his back on the floor, one leg up as the other drags on the floor, and this defining rim light as well on the edges. Although Miles was thrown away from the camera, as he moves farther away, the camera actually follows him and comes into a close-up, kind of compounding that moment of realization when Miles is seeing that the Spot is stronger now than he expected, and they're actually really in trouble, and enhancing the tension of that shot. Notice as Miles hits the ground, his body reacts in stages. First he's thrown down, and because he was thrown by the throat, brutal, that's what is leading the action. So that area, shoulders mostly, is what hits the ground first. Then there's drag on the arms and the legs and that follow through, and the arms and one leg and head hit the ground next, with a little more drag and offset on the one hand, and the other leg still tense and up in the air. See how as Miles stops skidding backwards, the leg that's still up overshoots and then goes down to give him support to prepare to get up. And then he pushes his upper body up and the legs basically swap poses. His eyes were mostly closed as he was thrown down and tensed his body for impact. But they're open now as he pushes up, and there's asymmetry in the eyes, which helps to give interest and expression to his face, since all we really have to go on for his expressions is the eyes, and they're creating this fan-like shape. Now we're looking at Miles kind of from the Spot's perspective from above him. I wouldn't quite say a bird's eye view, but we are looking down on him, as the Spot now has the upper hand over him. He's in a place of power. And this shot is angled with a Dutch tilt to portray how the tables have turned. There's this disorientation and confusion and unease for Miles, as the villain he and the other spider people had previously underestimated and seen as a joke is now pretty much owning all of them. Something interesting to note is that while Miles is animated on 2s, the environment is animated on 1s. You see there, he moves only on every second frame while the environment is moving on every single frame. So we have that kind of comic book vibe with the character animation. It's less perfectly smooth than usual 3D animation, which is usually animated on 1s by default because of the interpolation by the software. But in Spiderverse, the characters are usually animated on 2s, with some short shots or sequences done on 1s or even sometimes 3s. Hobie Brown was treated much differently and in a really cool way, and if you're interested in hearing more about that, you should check out my previous Across the Spiderverse video. I speak about Hobie at about 9.5 minutes in. But anyway, I digress. Miles leans his weight on his right elbow and his body tilts that way in anticipation to getting up. Then we cut to the Spot advancing on him. The Spot's posture is quite tilted. He looks very uncomfortable in this body with the way he holds himself and moves, although he has gotten more comfortable with it than he was at the beginning of the film. The camera angle is from a low angle, Miles' point of view, as we look up at the Spot, so we can feel that intimidation that Miles feels as he comes closer. We have Gwen, Paviter, and Hobie swinging into the shot from different directions for interest, and there's a distinct variety in their poses, each reflecting their personalities and personal brands, for want of a better word. All really nice clear silhouettes. The Spot is framed centrally so we can focus on him, and we've got a nice perspective here with him large in the foreground and them coming up behind him in the midground, and obviously the environment in the background. And it seems because they're so small and far away at first and swinging silently through the air from behind him that they're gonna sneak up on him and get him as he's focused fully on Miles. But then he spins around so suddenly with no warning, no anticipation in his body at all to prepare us for the next move. Because, you know, when you're watching an animation, anticipation kind of lets our subconscious know to expect an action to follow. But there's none of that here, so it comes as a surprise to even us. As in the next frame, he's already twisted so far to look at them, and we have these smear frames here also to show the speed of the motion and have us be able to read it more clearly, since it is happening so fast. Without the smear frames, an action like this may be too quick for the audience to actually register, so they may end up feeling confused about what just happened. The smear frame over here also follows the arc his hand would have made. If you're an animator, you'll know that our bodies move in arcs as our joints act as pivots. Our limbs rotate around the points of our joints, and the smear frames help to accentuate those arcs as well. Same here in this action, as he brings his arms up and around to fling the hole at the spider peeps. Nice wide arcs there on his arms. Even his body moves in an arc there as his waist and spine vertebra act as pivots. As his arms come over like that, he's using a lot of power behind that action, and he did it really fast, so the momentum keeps his arms swinging in an overshoot to the side of his body, and as they settle we have a bit of a moving hold in that pose. We've got a nice strong C-curve here on his spine, and I like how his head and chin are jutting out so strongly, leading the eye to where the next hole is going to open up, and the camera moves across there in that direction too. Smear frames on the environment to mimic motion blur as the camera pans over in anticipation of where the spider people will be dumped far away by the other hole that opens. And they use smear frames for these fast motion blurs instead of motion blur because of the comic book treatment. It keeps things solid and more stark, as there aren't really any blurry or feathered elements in these films. Everything is solid. They don't use actual blurs for anything. They use either smear frames or chromatic aberration or color offset to mimic things like blurs. So the camera moved to direct us towards this spot here. Nothing is there yet, but we know to expect something. We have Miles in frame, but he's not our focus because he's way over here in the bottom right of the screen, and we have the aisle guiding us here to this glaringly obvious empty spot that is just crying out for something to happen in it with the way that it's been framed, as this is a center frame. And then the hole opens up and Gwen, Hobie, and Pavita are dumped on the floor. And notice again here, the camera is at a Dutch tilt and it's also not locked off. It's got a handheld effect on it to keep it dynamic. Give us that feeling of energy and uncertainty you need in a fight scene. If this was done with a locked off camera, it would feel very stale and boring and slow. Miles is looking at the spot in the beginning of the sequence, and the hole opens up over here and dumps out the other guys, and a few frames later Miles notices and turns his head to look. And you see even the detail in the animation here. This happens in literally under 2 seconds that these guys are dumped out like this. The timing of each of them coming out is offset, so we can read each one clearly and get that impact. We've got all this drag and overlapping actions with their limbs as their bodies fall first and the limbs follow, rebound as they hit the ground, and that little slide there as Gwen lands on top of them but then slides down and settles, and you see that with her feet there. It's such a quick and faraway moment, but still so much goes into it. In the next scene, we cut to see Miles still on the ground, looking away to the other spider peeps, with his hand lifted, sort of preparing to fend off the spot. Then he turns to the spot and his eyes widen. We cut then to look up at this thingy. I forget what it's called, as it's sort of building up, powering up. Then we cut to this wide shot. We've got the two of them framed here between these seats as the camera tracks in to increase the tension as the spot advances on Miles, who's getting up. You can see in how Miles moves that his confidence has been shaken. His movements are less sure of themselves, he's hesitating, and his posture is cowering slightly. Shoulders hunched forward, weight on the back foot, and his body leaning away from the threat, rather than towards it with confidence in his ability to defeat it. And there's a clear contrast with the way the spot approaches him so confidently, pretty relaxed in the way he's just sort of chatting. Like, look at the calm way he moves his hand as he talks. There isn't any tension in that or his other actions as he walks, but Miles is holding himself rigidly and alertly. He's very tense. He looks ready to retreat with the way he's standing. We've got an opposing tilt here in his shoulders and hips, avoiding twinning here with the way his weight is unevenly distributed and one arm is up and the other hanging low, and also that nice use of straights and curves here. This arm and this leg straight and these curved for that interest in his pose. Clear silhouettes for both with a bright background behind them. We also see illustrated here the discrepancy in their sizes. The spot is way bigger than Miles, so Miles looks particularly vulnerable. We cut away again to the building up energy of this machine. It increases the tension of the scene, and the sound design also supports this as the sound of the machine builds up to get more frantic. Then cut to a close-up as the spot gets really close to Miles. This invasion of his personal space and that very obvious height difference, the way he gets so aggressively close and also takes up 2/3 of the screen while Miles only has his third in the bottom, all serves to highlight how drastically things have changed since the beginning when Miles was just seeing the spot as this bumbling idiot, and now the spot has all the power over him. His head dips down in anticipation as he says just and then tilts up very quickly and slightly forward to emphasize and show the force with which he shouts, "Joke to you." This is when we see the true deep anger he had at people not taking him seriously. He'd been acting a lot more calm before this, but as he shouts, this tendril of black matter also shoots out of his eye and we see that deep down rage. Then we cut away again to the machine thingy that blows its top, just like the spot just did. So there are some parallels here. The energy matches, and I love the treatment here of the explosion. We've got some 2D looking elements incorporated there with those strong lines, got some cool textural elements with the Bend-Aid dots and the halftones, and these cool kind of smoke elements that they've doubled up and slightly offset to give us a really chaotic vibe. And then at this point as well with the explosion, there's an inversion of the colors for some extra impact and drama. The other Spideys are swinging into action. Nice composition with each of them at a different depth in the scene, Gwen at the forefront, then Pavita and Hobie closing up the rear, and some nice forced perspective here with Gwen's leg to make it a little more exciting and also give more impact to the moment she realizes it's going to blow, and she draws her leg back and closes her eyes and ducks her head just before the explosion. So with the explosion, the other Spideys get blasted away and we see them tumbling back again, and then cut to Miles on the floor and the Spot towering over him, the Spot in the center of the frame with all that stuff happening behind him. He's about to get consumed by the chaos. I'm going to skip forward a bit to here where the Spot is almost there and he's preparing to go in. He's leaning his head back, pulling his shoulders back, opening up his body language as he moves from the left of the screen to the right. And they're using the rule of thirds here to frame him. His line of action is curved away from the energy, but as the web hits his back and stops him, we see that reversal in his posture with that overshoot as the momentum of stopping his motion towards the energy throws his limbs and head forward, and then that recovery as they settle again. And then the camera pans towards the direction the web came from to reveal the Spideys behind him, all on a web trying to stop him. There's really nice perspective here along the line of the web and nice clear silhouette so it's all readable. And Miles is telling the Spot that he's not a joke and he says, "Right, gang?" And as he does, he blinks and turns his head slightly to indicate he's talking to the people behind him. There's also a slight shift in his body and shoulders as he says that, but obviously his range of motion is limited because both of his arms are being pulled by the web. And we can see the effort here in his hand, which is right here in the foreground with this forced perspective, and it's visibly shaking with the tension. And then the Spot snips the web with his hole, and I have to say, I really like how much more deft and confident he got with his hole usage. Love that for him. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you to my patrons for all your support. You guys are and always will be the bee's knees and the ladybird's elbows. Subscribe to keep up to date with my other videos if you want. Hit the like button if you did like the video. Thanks for watching. Bye!